The massive chamber fell silent as Ambassador Zeph-7 stepped forward to the center of the Galactic Council floor. His insect-like body clicked nervously as he activated the holographic display that showed the horror spreading across their galaxy. Red dots marked dead systems, each one representing billions of lost lives and entire civilizations wiped from existence. Zeph-7 looked around at the assembled representatives from dozens of species, all watching him with growing fear in their various types of eyes. The Altarian Empire delegates sat in their floating energy pods, their blue skin glowing dimly with worry. The ancient crystalline collective members remained perfectly still, but their internal lights flickered with distress. Even the proud Nexus Federation ambassadors had stopped their usual political scheming to focus on the crisis at hand. The hologram showed a spreading darkness moving through space, consuming everything in its path. 3 entire star systems had vanished in the past month alone. Where once there had been planets full of life, now there was nothing but empty space and the twisted remains of bioships the size of moons. Ambassador Zeph-7 clicked his mandibles together and began to speak through his universal translator device. The words that came out were heavy with desperation and fear that even the machine could not hide. The Veltar swarm had appeared without warning 6 months ago at the edge of the galaxy. At first, the various civilizations thought they were dealing with another species trying to expand their territory. Wars happened all the time between different races, and the Galactic Council had protocols for handling such conflicts. Diplomatic missions were sent to establish contact and negotiate boundaries. Those diplomatic ships never returned. The first real battle came when the Altarian Empire sent their 3rd fleet to investigate. The Altarians were masters of energy, manipulation, able to create weapons that could crack planets and shields that could stop almost any attack. Their ships were works of art, flowing curves of metal and energy that moved through space like living things. The Veltar bioships tore through them, like they were made of paper. The recordings from the battle showed something that gave nightmares to military strategists across the galaxy. The swarm did not just destroy the Altarian fleet, they absorbed it. The bioships extended tendrils that wrapped around the burning wreckage, pulling it inside themselves. Within hours, new swarm vessels emerged, incorporating Altarian energy technology into their own twisted designs. The Crystalline Collective tried next, sending their living ship constructs powered by the consciousness of their greatest warriors. These ships could repair themselves instantly and adapt to any attack pattern. They had never been defeated in 10,000 years of warfare. The swarm consumed them too, and within days, bioships with crystalline armor and self-repair abilities joined the growing fleet of horrors. Each victory made the Veltar stronger. They did not just win battles, they learned from every engagement and grew more powerful. Their biotechnology could absorb and integrate any weapon or defense they encountered. Quantum shields became part of their armor. Plasma cannons grew from their hulls like flowers of destruction. Zeph-7 manipulated the hologram to show the current extent of swarm territory. The red area had grown to encompass nearly a quarter of the galaxy's outer rim. 12 civilizations had been completely destroyed, their worlds stripped bare and converted into more bioships and warriors. The council chamber erupted in nervous chatter as delegates realized the true scope of the crisis. The swarm was not just another enemy to negotiate with or fight using conventional tactics. This was an extinction event spreading across the galaxy, like a plague. Commander Vex-High of the Nexus Federation stood up, his mechanical body gleaming under the chamber lights. His species had replaced most of their organic parts with advanced technology, making them living computers capable of processing information at incredible speeds. He had run the calculations, and they were not encouraging. At their current rate of expansion, the Veltar would consume the entire galaxy within 50 years. Every world, every species, every trace of civilization would be converted into more bioships serving their hive mind. There would be nothing left but an endless fleet of living vessels drifting through dead space. The Crystalline Collective representative, Elder Cormath, spoke in harmonious tones that resonated through the chamber. Her species was among the oldest in the galaxy, having achieved spaceflight when most others were still learning to use tools. Their wisdom was respected by all, even their enemies. She had consulted the ancient databases, searching through millions of years of galactic history for any reference to something like the Veltar. What she found was even more disturbing than their current situation. The swarm had appeared before, roughly every 10 million years, emerging from the dark space between galaxies to consume everything in their path. Each time, they had grown, until nothing could stop them, then disappeared as mysteriously as they had come. But this time felt different. This time they seemed more organized, more intelligent, more hungry. The assembled delegates listened in growing horror as Elder Cormath described the ancient records. Entire galactic civilizations had risen and fallen between swarm appearances, leaving behind only ruins and warnings carved in stone on dead worlds. The message was always the same. They came from darkness. They consumed everything, and they could not be stopped. But Zeph 7 was not ready to give up. His own people, the Corellians, were directly in the path of the advancing swarm. His homeworld had less than 2 months before the bioships arrived to begin the process of consumption. Billions of his people would die unless something could be done to stop or at least slow the enemy advance. He had spent weeks researching every possible solution, consulting with military experts from across the galaxy, searching through databases of exotic weapons and theoretical technologies. Everything had been tried and failed. The swarm adapted faster than any conventional military response could be developed. But there was one option that kept appearing in his research, mentioned only in whispers and classified reports. A species so dangerous that most civilizations refused to make contact with them. A race that lived on a world so hostile that it was classified as unsurvivable by galactic standards. The humans of Sol 3, also known as Earth, Elder Cormath, had access to the restricted files about this species. What she read there defied belief. They lived on a planet where the weather could kill them, where the native life forms spent their time trying to eat each other, where natural disasters regularly wiped out entire regions. The gravity was too strong, the radiation too intense, the atmospheric composition too volatile, and somehow these creatures had not just survived, but thrived in such conditions. The few contact reports that existed painted a picture of beings who approached problems in ways that violated every principle of logical thinking. They used primitive weapons that should have been useless but somehow worked. They fought wars using tactics that made no sense but achieved victory anyway. They built machines that should not function, but did anyway through sheer stubborn determination. Most, disturbing of all, they seemed to enjoy the challenge of surviving in impossible conditions. Zeph 7 looked around the chamber one final time, seeing the fear and desperation in every face. The greatest civilizations in the galaxy, with technology that could reshape matter and energy, with weapons that could destroy stars, with defenses that had stood for millions of years, were helpless against an enemy that simply absorbed everything thrown at it. Maybe it was time to try something completely different. Maybe it was time to contact the deathworld species that the galaxy had been avoiding out of fear and disgust. Maybe creatures who lived every day on the edge of extinction would know how to fight an enemy that brought extinction to others. The decision was made with a simple voice vote. For the first time in galactic history, an official message would be sent to the humans of Earth, asking for their help in saving the galaxy from complete annihilation. None of them had any idea what they were about to unleash. Captain Jake Morrison was enjoying his morning coffee aboard the orbital defense station New Horizon when every alarm on the station started screaming at once. He nearly dropped his mug as technicians ran past him toward the communication arrays, their faces showing the kind of panic usually reserved for incoming asteroid strikes or solar flares. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez burst into the command center, her pilot uniform still wrinkled from sleep. She had been catching a few hours of rest between patrol runs when the emergency signals woke everyone on the station. Her dark eyes were wide with confusion as she looked at the displays showing incoming transmissions from deep space. The communication officer, a young man named Danny Cooper, was frantically adjusting controls and running diagnostics on equipment that had never been designed to handle signals from outside the solar system. Earth's technology was primitive compared to what was flooding their receivers, but somehow the alien transmission was adapting itself to work with their systems. Jake moved to the main display where the incoming message was being decoded by every computer system they had. The translation software was struggling with languages it had never encountered before, but slowly words began to appear on the screen in broken English, mixed with fragments of other Earth languages. Help us, please. Big danger coming to eat all worlds. Many people's already dead. You are last hope. Planet locations follow this message. Time is short. Please help before all die. The message repeated in Mandarin, Spanish, Russian, Arabic, and a dozen other Earth languages, each version slightly different as if the sender was guessing at the correct grammar and vocabulary. What followed was a massive data package containing star charts, tactical information, and recordings of battles that showed horrors beyond anything Earth had ever imagined. Jake stared at the data streaming across his screens, trying to process what he was seeing. The star charts showed a galaxy full of civilizations he had never heard of, and something called the Veltar Swarm consuming everything in its path. The battle recordings showed bioships the size of continents fighting fleets of advanced spacecraft that made Earth's best warships look like toys. Within an hour, every major government on Earth had received copies of the transmission. President Maria Martinez called an emergency session of the United Earth Defense Council, bringing together military leaders, scientists, and politicians from around the globe. The meeting was held in the secure bunker beneath Geneva, where humanity's leaders had gathered during their worst crises. General Lisa Chang pulled up holographic displays showing the alien star charts overlaid with Earth's limited knowledge of nearby space. The scale was staggering and terrifying. The red zones marking swarm territory covered thousands of star systems, each one representing billions of lost lives. Admiral Peter Kane studied the tactical data with the eye of someone who had spent 40 years fighting Earth's wars. He had commanded fleets during the Water Wars of 2157 and the Mars Independence Conflict of 2164. He knew how to read battle reports and assess enemy capabilities, even when those enemies were unlike anything he had ever encountered. What he saw in those alien recordings made his blood run cold. The Veltar bioships moved through space like living things, growing and adapting in real time. They absorbed enemy weapons and turned them into part of their own arsenal. They consumed entire fleets and used the material to build more ships. Every victory made them stronger. Every defeat taught them new ways to kill. Dr. Helen Foster, Earth's leading expert on alien life forms, studied the biological data included in the transmission. Her specialty was theoretical xenobiology, but she had never expected to encounter actual alien life forms during her career. Now she was looking at creatures that violated every principle she had learned about how life should work. The Veltar were not just a species, but a collective organism spanning multiple star systems. Individual bioships were more like organs, in a vast body controlled by a single intelligence. They did not reproduce in any way that Earth science could understand, instead growing new units from absorbed matter and energy. Engineer Tony Walsh examined the technical specifications of the various alien technologies mentioned in the data package. His background was in improvised engineering, the art of making things work when they should not be able to work. He had kept Earth's defense stations running with spare parts and creativity when proper repairs were impossible. The alien technology was far beyond anything Earth possessed, but Tony could see patterns in how it functioned. Energy weapons that could melt through hull plating, shields that could deflect planet-killing impacts, faster-than-light drives that could cross the galaxy in weeks. All of it useless against an enemy that simply absorbed and adapted to everything thrown at it. President Martinez looked around the table at the assembled experts, seeing doubt and fear in their faces. Earth's entire space navy consisted of 12 cruisers, 30 destroyers, and about 50 patrol ships. They were designed to fight human pirates and defend against asteroid impacts, not battle bioships the size of small moons. But there was something else in the room besides fear. Jake could see it in the way General Chang studied the tactical displays, looking for weaknesses and opportunities. He could see it in Admiral Kane's expression as he calculated odds and possibilities. He could see it in Dr. Foster's excitement as she examined truly alien life for the first time. Humanity had always been at its best when facing impossible odds. The discussion that followed lasted 18 hours, with breaks only for food and coffee. Military strategists argued with scientists about the feasibility of fighting an intergalactic war with primitive weapons. Politicians worried about the cost and risk of committing Earth's forces to a conflict that might be unwinnable. But gradually, a consensus emerged. The aliens had specifically asked for Earth's help, which meant they saw something in humanity that their advanced civilizations lacked. They were desperate enough to contact a species they had been avoiding, which suggested that conventional military thinking had failed completely. Jake found himself selected to lead the first human expedition beyond the solar system. His experience, commanding the orbital defense stations, had given him skills in coordinating complex operations under pressure. More importantly, he had a reputation for creative problem-solving and keeping his crew alive in dangerous situations. Lieutenant Rodriguez would serve as his pilot and navigation officer. Her skills at flying through asteroid fields and space debris had earned her a reputation as the best pilot in Earth's fleet. Sergeant Carl Bennett, a Marine who had survived the Titan colony uprising and the Europa mining wars, would handle security and ground operations. Dr. Foster volunteered to join the mission as their xenobiology expert. Her knowledge of alien, life forms, even theoretical ones, might be crucial in understanding the enemy they would face. Engineer Walsh completed the team, bringing his talent for making impossible repairs and modifications with whatever materials were available. The ship selected for the mission was the Defiance, a modified cruiser that had been upgraded with Earth's most advanced technology. It was not much compared to the alien vessels shown in the recordings, but it was fast, tough, and equipped with weapons that might surprise an enemy expecting more conventional attacks. As Jake prepared for humanity's first journey into interstellar space, he could not shake the feeling that they were about to step into something far bigger and more dangerous than anyone realized. The aliens had asked for help, but they had no idea what they were getting when they called on Earth's deathworlders. The Defiance launched 3 days later, carrying humanity's hopes and the desperate prayers of a species that had never backed down from a fight, no matter how impossible the odds appeared to be. The human ship Defiance dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Corellian space, and Jake Morrison felt his stomach drop as he saw what waited for them. Through the main view screen, a nightmare of biology and technology stretched across the star system like a cancer eating everything in its path. The Veltar bioship was beyond anything the recordings had prepared them for. It hung in space like a living mountain, easily 50 kilometers from end to end, its surface covered in what looked like breathing flesh and pulsing veins. Smaller craft swarmed around it like insects, each one the size of Earth's largest battleships but moving with the fluid grace of sea creatures. Lieutenant Rodriguez gripped her control stick so tightly her knuckles turned white as she watched. The alien vessels move in perfect coordination. There was no visible communication between them, no hesitation or confusion, just seamless movement, as if they were all parts of the same organism. Her pilot training had not prepared her for enemies that moved like schools of fish through the vacuum of space. Dr. Foster was recording everything through the ship's sensors, her scientific mind trying to process biological forms that should not be able to survive in the cold emptiness of space. The bioships had no obvious engines or propulsion systems, yet they moved faster than anything Earth had ever built. They had no visible weapons, yet the recordings showed them destroying entire fleets with ease. Engineer Walsh studied the technical readouts with growing amazement and horror. The energy signatures coming from the swarm vessels were unlike anything in Earth's databases. They seemed to be generating power through some kind of biological process, converting matter directly into energy at rates that should have been impossible without fusion reactors. Sergeant Bennett cleaned his weapons for the 5th time in an hour, a nervous habit he had developed during his years of military service. He had fought in every major conflict of the past decade, but those had been battles between humans using weapons he understood. This was something entirely different, something that made his combat experience feel useless. Jake was about to order a retreat to a safer distance when their sensors detected another ship approaching from deeper in the system. It was clearly alien but different from the swarm vessels, made of what looked like living crystal that caught and reflected the light of the local star. The ship was trailing atmosphere and debris, obviously damaged and trying to escape from something terrible. The Crystal Song, flagship of Ambassador F7, limped toward them with engines failing and hull breaches venting precious air into space. Behind it came 3 swarm scout ships, smaller than the main bio-vessels but still larger than the Defiance. They moved like predators closing in on wounded prey, taking their time because they knew their victim could not escape. Jake made a decision that would have gotten him court-martialed under normal circumstances. He ordered Rodriguez to intercept the pursuing swarm ships, knowing that Earth's first contact with alien life was about to become Earth's first interstellar battle. The Defiance accelerated toward the enemy scouts, its nuclear engines pushing the ship to maximum speed. The human crew felt the crushing force of acceleration as their inertial dampeners struggled to compensate. Earth technology was crude compared to alien systems, but it had one advantage that would prove crucial in the coming fight. It was completely unpredictable. The swarm scouts had encountered thousands of different alien technologies during their expansion across the galaxy. They had fought energy weapons and particle beams, quantum torpedoes and gravity cannons, shields that could deflect black holes and armor that could survive inside stars. Their collective intelligence had cataloged every possible form of space combat and developed counters for all of them. But they had never fought humans before. Rodriguez opened fire with the Defiance's main weapons, a battery of railguns that fired metal slugs using electromagnetic acceleration. The technology was ancient by galactic standards, barely more sophisticated than throwing rocks at high speed. The swarm scouts did not even bother to defend against such primitive attacks. The metal projectiles tore through their bio-armor like it was made of paper. The lead scout ship shuddered as tungsten slugs punched holes through its living hull, spilling strange fluids into space. Its perfect coordination faltered for the first time as pain signals flooded back to the hive mind controlling it. The collective intelligence suddenly realized it was facing something it had no experience with. Bennett launched a spread of missiles, loaded with high explosives, another technology so primitive that most galactic civilizations had abandoned it millions of years ago in favor of more elegant energy weapons. The bioships tried to absorb the incoming projectiles the way they absorbed energy blasts, extending tendrils to capture and convert the attacks. The explosions ripped their tendrils apart and sent shockwaves through their organic systems. Walsh had modified the ship's sensors to emit random electromagnetic pulses, jamming equipment that had never encountered such crude interference. The swarm scouts lost their perfect coordination as their biological communication systems struggled to adapt to the chaotic signals flooding their senses. Dr. Foster watched in fascination as the enemy ships began to change, their bio-armor thickening and hardening in response to the railgun attacks. The Veltar adaptation abilities were working exactly as described in the alien records, but they needed time to analyze and counter new threats. Time that Jake was not going to give them. He ordered Rodriguez to ram the damaged scout ship at full speed, a tactic so insane that no rational military mind would consider it. The swarm collective intelligence calculated the probability of such an attack at less than 1%, which meant their defensive systems were not prepared for it. The Defiance struck the bioship amidships with enough force to crack planets, its reinforced hull designed to survive impacts with space debris, punching through organic armor like it was wet tissue. Both ships spun away from the collision-trailing wreckage, but the human vessel had been built to take damage while the alien ship had evolved expecting its enemies to fight at a distance. The remaining 2 scout ships tried to coordinate a counterattack, but their perfect synchronization had been shattered by encounters with weapons and tactics that made no logical sense. One turned to flee back to the main fleet, while the other continued its attack on the Crystal Song. Unsure how to process the new data it was gathering, Jake used the confusion to rescue the alien survivors, ordering Bennett and his Marines to board the damaged Crystal Song and evacuate its crew. What followed was humanity's first face-to-face meeting with alien life, taking place in the midst of a running battle with bioships that wanted to consume everything they encountered. Ambassador F7 was unconscious when the human Marines found him. his insect-like body covered in strange wounds from the bioship attack. Dr. Foster worked frantically to stabilize him using human medical techniques adapted for alien physiology, improvising treatments based on her theoretical knowledge and desperate hope. Engineer Walsh somehow managed to patch the alien life support systems using human tools and spare parts, creating hybrid repairs that should not have worked, but did anyway through sheer stubborn determination. His modifications kept the Crystal Song's crew alive long enough to transfer them to the Defiance's medical bay. Sergeant Bennett organized the evacuation with military precision while dodging debris from the ongoing battle, his Marines carrying wounded aliens through corridors filled with toxic atmosphere and failing gravity. None of them had trained for this kind of rescue operation, but they adapted quickly because adaptation was what humans did best. As the Defiance pulled away from the battle site with its cargo of alien refugees, Jake realized that Earth had just announced its presence to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. They had engaged the supposedly unstoppable Veltar swarm, and not only survived but actually damaged their attackers. The real war was about to begin, and humanity was no longer an unknown factor hiding on a distant deathworld. They were players in a galactic conflict that would determine whether any life survived to see the next millennium. Ambassador Zeph-7 woke up in the medical bay of the Defiance 3 days after the rescue, his compound eyes focusing slowly on the strange interior of a human starship. Everything looked wrong to him, built with sharp angles and crude materials, instead of the flowing organic curves his people preferred. The air smelled of metal and chemicals, nothing like the sweet atmosphere of Corellian ships. Dr. Foster was checking his vital signs using a combination of human medical equipment and improvised sensors she had built to work with alien biology. Her approach to xenomedicine was based entirely on educated guesses and desperate improvisation. But somehow she had managed to keep him alive when his own people's medical technology had failed. Jake Morrison entered the medical bay carrying a cup of coffee and looking like he had not slept since the rescue operation. The human captain had spent the past 3 days coordinating with Earth Command and trying to understand the tactical situation they had stumbled into. The data from the Crystal Song's computers painted a picture of galactic warfare that made Earth's conflicts look like children playing with toys. Zeph-7 tried to sit up, his insect-like limbs trembling with weakness as he struggled to process what had happened. The last thing he remembered was his flagship being torn apart by swarm bioships, his crew dying around him as their weapons proved useless against an enemy that absorbed every attack and grew stronger from each victory. Now he was alive aboard, a primitive vessel crewed by the galaxy's most feared deathworld species. And somehow these creatures had driven off Veltar scouts that should have been able to destroy them without effort. His understanding of how warfare worked had been shattered along with his ship. Jake pulled up a holographic display showing the current tactical situation in the Corellian system. The main swarm fleet was still consuming the outer planets, growing larger and more powerful with each passing hour. Refugee ships from across the system were fleeing toward the galactic core, carrying survivors from worlds that had been stripped bare of all organic matter. The Galactic Council forces were maintaining a defensive line around the fourth planet, but their formation was slowly crumbling as more bioships arrived to join the swarm fleet. Energy weapons that could crack moons barely scratched the enemy armor. Quantum shields that could deflect black holes were being penetrated by organic weapons that adapted faster than defensive systems could compensate. Dr. Foster showed Zeph-7 her analysis of the bioship samples they had collected during the battle. The Veltar tissue was unlike anything in Earth's biological databases, able to rapidly evolve new functions in response to external threats. It could become armor when attacked with kinetic weapons, or develop energy absorption properties when faced with plasma cannons. But there was something the alien tissue could not adapt to, something that had never existed in the galaxy before humans arrived. Dr. Foster had exposed the samples to common Earth bacteria, microorganisms so primitive that galactic science barely considered them to be alive. The advanced biotissue died. Within minutes, Engineer Walsh had been studying the wreckage from the scout ships they had damaged, trying to understand how swarm technology worked. What he found violated every principle of engineering he had learned during his career. The bioships grew their components instead of building them, using organic processes that could repair damage and adapt to new situations faster than any mechanical system. But organic systems had weaknesses that mechanical ones did not. They could be poisoned, infected, or confused by biological agents that targeted their living processes. Earth's primitive understanding of biological warfare suddenly looked like an advantage instead of a limitation. Lieutenant Rodriguez had been analyzing the movement patterns of the swarm fleet, looking for tactical weaknesses that human pilots might be able to exploit. The bioships moved in perfect coordination because they were controlled by a single collective intelligence, but that coordination depended on constant communication between all units. Disrupt that communication, and the perfect formation would collapse into chaos. Sergeant Bennett had been training with weapons recovered from the Crystal Song, trying to understand how galactic military technology worked. The alien weapons were far more powerful than anything Earth possessed, but they were designed to fight enemies that followed logical tactical doctrine and used predictable strategies. The Veltar had adapted to counter every conventional military approach used by advanced civilizations. They had never encountered an enemy that specialized in unconventional warfare, improvised tactics, and weapons that should not work, but did anyway through sheer stubborn determination. Jake outlined his plan to the assembled crew, knowing that what he was about to propose would be considered insane by any rational military commander. Instead of trying to match the swarm's advanced technology with superior firepower, Earth would fight them using the one advantage humanity possessed over every other species in the galaxy: complete unpredictability combined with weapons so primitive that no advanced civilization would consider using them. The message he sent back to Earth Command was simple and direct. Send everything that could fly and fight, but do not send conventional military units using standard tactics. Send the craziest, most unpredictable crews Earth could find, equipped with weapons that made no sense and tactics that violated every principle of logical warfare. Earth's response exceeded even Jake's expectations. Within a week, 300 modified cargo ships were heading toward Corellian space, each one crewed by volunteers who had been specifically chosen for their ability to think outside conventional military doctrine. Captain Lisa Park commanded a converted freighter loaded with Marines who specialized in close-quarters combat, using weapons that most militaries had abandoned centuries ago. Her crew carried shotguns, flamethrowers, and explosives designed for demolition, work rather than space combat. Their approach to fighting bioships was simple and direct: get close enough to board them and start breaking things. Commander Rick Stone had turned his cargo hauler into a flying chemistry lab, manufacturing improvised weapons from industrial chemicals and mining explosives. His ship's cargo holds were filled with compounds that should not exist in the same space, held stable only by his complete disregard for safety regulations and his talent for making dangerous substances do exactly what he wanted them to do. Dr. Maya Chen commanded a research vessel that had been converted into a biological warfare platform, using Earth's most primitive and effective biological agents. While alien civilizations fought clean wars using energy and physics, she prepared to unleash bacteria, viruses, and toxins that had evolved in Earth's hostile environment over billions of years. But the most important ship in the fleet was commanded by Engineer Walsh's cousin, Tommy Walsh, whose specialty was building machines that should not function but somehow worked anyway. His cargo holds were filled with spare parts, industrial equipment, and tools that could be assembled into weapons using nothing but human creativity and stubborn refusal to accept that something was impossible. Each ship carried different weapons, different tactics, and different levels of crazy that would make coordination impossible under normal circumstances. But Jake was not planning to coordinate them in any conventional sense. Instead, he would turn 300 ships full of unpredictable humans loose on an enemy that had spent millions of years learning to counter logical military strategies. The Veltar collective intelligence was about to discover that humans did not fight logical wars. As the human fleet approached the battle zone, Ambassador Zeph 7 watched from the bridge of the Defiance and wondered if his people had made a terrible mistake in asking for help from Earth's deathworlders. The approaching ships looked like a collection of armed merchant vessels rather than a military fleet. and their crews were clearly planning to attack bioships the size of continents using weapons that belonged in a museum. But then he remembered how easily the primitive Defiance had damaged swarm scouts that should have been invulnerable. And he began to understand that maybe logical thinking was not always the best approach to solving impossible problems. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when perfectly coordinated enemies met perfectly chaotic opponents. The battle for the Corellian system began at exactly 0800 Galactic Standard Time, when Captain Lisa Park's converted freighter opened fire on a bioship the size of a small moon, using weapons that had not been seen in space combat for over 1,000 years. Her Marines were armed with shotguns loaded with shells designed for hunting Earth's most dangerous animals, weapons so primitive that the swarm's defensive systems did not even recognize them as threats. The first volley of ammunition tore through bio-armor that could deflect planet-killing energy beams, punching holes in living tissue that began bleeding strange fluids into the vacuum of space. The Veltar collective intelligence experienced something it had never felt before in millions of years of perfect coordination. Surprise mixed with the biological equivalent of pain. Commander Rick Stone's flying chemistry lab approached from a completely different angle, launching containers filled with industrial cleaning solvents that had been weaponized using knowledge gained from Earth's most toxic waste disposal sites. The bioships tried to absorb the incoming projectiles the way they absorbed energy weapons, extending tendrils to capture and convert the attacks. The corrosive chemicals ate through their organic systems like acid through paper. Dr. Maya Chen released clouds of Earth bacteria into space near the largest bioships, microscopic organisms that had evolved to survive in conditions that would kill most galactic life forms. The advanced alien tissue had no defense against pathogens that operated on such a primitive level, and massive biovessels began dying from infections that their sophisticated immune systems could not even detect. But the real chaos began when Tommy Walsh started building impossible weapons from spare parts while his ship was actively engaged in combat. His cargo holds were filled with mining equipment, industrial tools, and electronic components that should not have been able to work together in any functional way. Using welding torches, duct tape, and sheer human stubbornness, he assembled a device that fired compressed air mixed with metal shavings at velocities that violated several laws of physics. The weapon should not have worked, but it punched through swarm armor that had adapted to resist every known form of attack. The Veltar hive mind tried desperately to analyze and counter the human attacks, but every time their bioships adapted to one threat, the humans would switch to completely different weapons and tactics. Shotguns became flamethrowers. Flamethrowers became ice cannons built from refrigeration equipment. Ice cannons became sonic weapons assembled from mining drills and powered by coffee machines. Lieutenant Rodriguez found herself flying attack patterns that made no sense according to any tactical manual ever written, pulling maneuvers that should have torn her ship apart but worked because she refused to believe they were impossible. Her modified cargo hauler danced between bioships that moved like living mountains, dodging organic weapons while delivering payloads of explosives to targets that logic said she could never reach. Sergeant Bennett led boarding parties inside bioships using combat techniques he had learned fighting in Earth's urban war zones, moving through alien corridors in ways that violated every principle of military doctrine, but worked perfectly against enemies who calculated optimal defensive positions based on logical attack patterns. The human Marines fought room-to-room battles, inside living vessels using knives and crowbars and improvised explosives to destroy organic systems that could repair damage from energy weapons in seconds. They moved like street fighters rather than soldiers, unpredictable and vicious in ways that the swarm's perfect coordination could not counter. Dr. Foster introduced the bioships to Earth's biological warfare arsenal, not advanced engineered superviruses but common diseases that had evolved naturally in Earth's hostile environment. The common cold brought down continent-sized vessels whose immune systems had no experience with such primitive pathogens. Engineer Walsh jury-rigged quantum torpedoes from incompatible alien technologies held together with actual duct tape and human determination, launching weapons that should have exploded in his cargo bay, but instead penetrated swarm shields because their targeting systems could not calculate the trajectory of projectiles that violated basic physics. The turning point came when Jake Morrison, realized something that all the advanced galactic civilizations had missed during their failed battles with the Veltar. The swarm was not just a hive mind controlling individual bioships, it was perfect coordination incarnate, a collective intelligence that had evolved to manage millions of units with flawless efficiency. And perfect coordination had a fatal weakness. When faced with perfect chaos, Jake broadcast on all human frequencies, his voice reaching every ship in the chaotic battle that was raging across the star system. His orders were simple and completely insane by any standard of rational military thinking. Stop trying to fight the enemy efficiently. Fight them wrong. Fight them stupid. Fight them like the crazy deathworld species that the galaxy feared and avoided. What followed was the most beautifully chaotic military disaster in galactic history, a battle that would be studied and argued about for thousands of years by military historians who could never quite understand how it worked. Human ships attacked in formations that made no tactical sense, using weapons inappropriately and communicating in slang that the swarm's translation systems could not process. They made strategic decisions based on gut feelings, lucky guesses, and whatever seemed like a good idea at the moment. Captain Park's Marines somehow infiltrated the Queen bioship, a massive organism the size of Earth's moon, by crawling through maintenance shafts that should not have existed but did, because human engineers had installed them, just in case they might be useful someday. The explosives they planted at what Dr. Foster insisted were the alien equivalent of nerve centers were assembled from mining charges, industrial timers, and components salvaged from broken coffee machines. The devices should not have functioned, but they detonated with enough force to disrupt the hive mind's central coordination systems. The explosion that followed was felt across the entire star system as the Veltar collective intelligence experienced something completely outside its millions of years of perfect evolution. Total system failure caused by weapons and tactics that made no logical sense. Swarm bioships that had moved in perfect coordination suddenly found themselves operating independently, confused and vulnerable, without the hive mind's constant guidance. The organic vessels tried to adapt to individual combat, but they had evolved to function as parts of a greater whole. The Galactic Council fleet, following human coordination patterns they did not understand but had learned to trust, destroyed the scattered bioships systematically. Energy weapons that had been useless against coordinated swarm defenses proved devastatingly effective against confused individual targets. Within 18 hours, the Veltar fleet that had consumed 12 civilizations was reduced to debris floating in space around planets that would live to see another day. The bioships that survived the battle fled toward the galactic rim, their hive mind damaged beyond immediate repair. 6 months later, Ambassador Zeph-7 stood before the Galactic Council with a proposal that would have been unthinkable before the swarm crisis. He moved to offer full membership to the human species of Sol 3, recognizing them as equals among the galaxy's advanced civilizations. The response was mixed, as it always was when the Council faced major decisions. Fear, respect, gratitude, and terror in equal measure, as delegates tried to process what they had witnessed during the battle for Corellian space. Commander Vex High protested that humans fought like madmen, with no strategy, no logic, and no predictability. Elder Cormath replied that this was exactly what the galaxy needed when facing threats that conventional wisdom could not handle. Jake Morrison, representing Earth at his first council session, listened to the debate with the patience of someone who had spent his career dealing with bureaucrats and politicians. When called upon to respond, his answer was simple and direct. Earth appreciated the offer of full membership, but humans preferred to remain independent. However, if the galaxy ever faced another threat to innocent life, if something came that could not be stopped by conventional means, they should send word to the little blue planet in the Sol system. Earth's deathworlders would answer the call. As Jake left the chamber, whispers followed him through the corridors of the council station. The humans were staying on their deathworld, content to be left alone with their dangerous weather and hostile wildlife. But now everyone knew that when the galaxy faced its darkest hour, there was a species of absolute madmen just a few light years away who would fight impossible battles using weapons that should not work and tactics that made no sense. The Veltar swarm was destroyed. 12 civilizations were saved. And the galaxy had learned an important lesson about the species from the little blue death world in the Sol system. Never underestimate the power of organized chaos, especially when it was powered by caffeine, determination, and the stubborn refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible.